Have you noticed how often you criticize yourself, judge yourself? Because I pay attention to that a lot. That I'm constantly judging myself, censoring myself, constantly thinking like, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't share that thing because it's not perfect. I know that it's always gonna be different from person to person what one deems as being ugly or beautiful. If you're someone like myself who is, you know, creating your own stuff, creating your own patterns, or creating your own things, creating your own art, that is a difficult thing, because then that means you're leading the way. You're doing something that other people might be too scared to do or too embarrassed to do, because it requires you to be very, very, very free and not hold yourself back, if that makes sense. You can't hold yourself back. You have to just allow yourself to go where you want to go. And as soon as you start to judge yourself, or not just judge yourself, but as soon as you listen to that judgment, then you're already limiting yourself. And after I just finished writing my newsletter about imperfection, I just realized how important it is to be imperfect and to share your imperfections. Something we're so used to now seeing, for instance, filters everywhere. And we're used to that, so that becomes the norm. When I want to create something, for instance, there was a point where I wanted to create a beaded heart, a crochet heart. And I don't know how to crochet hearts. I haven't done it before. And I know I could have gone onto YouTube and Googled, but I don't want that, because I like the process of experimenting. I like the process of trying to figure it out for myself. It's not because I think there's anything wrong with following what someone else is doing, but the fact that we even have patterns for that is because someone has sat down and decided to try and make that. It might not have been perfectly how I wanted it to be, but the process of doing it, like following my own path and being in that process of experimenting, that is important to me, because it's about allowing myself to play. It is about my inner child. It is about my child self that I have suppressed for most of my life. That perspective for me is life-changing, to realize that if I limit myself in terms of being, like, if I limit myself to being perfect, if I stop myself, if I judge myself for being imperfect, or creating something that is imperfect, creating something that is ugly, or something I deem ugly, and if I limit myself and if I don't share it, I don't get to, first of all, allow my child to express that and to feel free enough to be that. To be free, to play, to have fun, to experiment, to create something. And at the same time, I also limit other people in mirroring me in that authenticity. If I expect myself to be perfect and only share things that are perfect, well, then I never get to feel what it's like to be loved for who I am, or like for my authenticity. That I perceive something as being ugly or not good enough, not pretty enough, not polished enough, whatever it is that you also experience when you're doing something for the first time. For instance, if you're learning anything for the first time, you're gonna be bad at it. Just as I talked about in the newsletter, I got thinking about while I was writing. The Bake Off program, den store bagedyst, it's called in Denmark, but is it called the Great British Bake Off or something in Britain? Anyways, the baking program, the cake and baking program, where the judges always talk about finish, the cake's finish, or like how pretty it looks, or how polished it looks. It's not subjective. Like, there is an objective in terms of maybe not like art, but like creations. just as making a meal and how you present it. There are different ways of doing it, and of course there might be still spectrums in terms of what people think is pretty. Some people like very abstract presentation in food, stuff like that. But there's still an idea of, this is a polished cake, this is a pretty cake, like the glazing is perfect, like it's got the right temperature and all of those things. So then I got to thinking that, like, so what? I would rather see an ugly cake than no cake. I would rather you create an ugly cake than no cake. You can't be too kind to yourself. You can't be too forgiving on yourself. And again, it's a learning curve. And it's not because you're learning less, because you're restricting yourself and not allowing yourself to create something imperfect, not allowing yourself to stumble and fall, not allowing yourself to make something that is ugly. You're still learning by doing that. So instead of expecting yourself to create something that is perfect, or like practicing it for a long time without actually sharing it or showing it to anyone, just being like in your own bubble with it, waiting for it to be perfect and then you can share it. And it's not because it's bad to keep that separate, but I think it's bad when we judge that part of the process, or think that it's bad, or something that you're not perfect, that you're not doing it perfectly, that like you can't crochet your first ever item and be proud of it. Even if you can look at other people who have made something similar and compare it and feel like, oh, mine is not as polished as theirs, mine is not as perfect. So what? So what? And as I always say, crochet is not brain surgery. You can't do it wrong. You're not gonna kill anyone by doing that. You're not gonna be punished for it. It's an art form, it's a creativity, and maybe there will always be these imperfections and these things that we think is ugly. We might never reach that point of just being on top of the craft and just being like perfect all the time. But that's not how it's supposed to be. Even if you've been crocheting for years and years and years, like I have, I make so many mistakes. That oftentimes I feel really, really embarrassed about it. It's still something I'm practicing to not feel. I have judged myself so much for making mistakes and for, sharing something that was not good enough, and been hard on myself and been like, why didn't you wait? Why didn't you stay in that creating process for a little bit longer? Why didn't you hide your creations for a bit longer so you could hone your skills even more, so you could be even better? Well, you're constantly competing with yourself, constantly wanting to be better. But I think that is already happening. Like you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself, because you are still learning, you are still growing. Even when you're cutting yourself some slack, being kind to yourself, you're still learning. It's almost like those parents who are tough love kind of thing. Like, I just have to, beat my kids, then they will understand respect. I have to teach them the hard way. That was my parents. So this kind of attitude with the world is a tough place, so you might as well just toughen up so you can handle it. Instead of saying, well, with kindness, with love, with care, with respect for myself, I can also handle a harsh world. I might be able to handle it even better because I have that kindness towards myself and that love in myself and trust in myself that I can always return to in myself. So instead of always having to be so tough with everything, I could go on, I think, about this, but I'm gonna stop now and hope that you remember that It's okay to be human. It's okay to be imperfect. And it's also okay to let other people witness it. Even if you're someone who makes patterns or like makes products, even if you sell those creations, they can still be imperfect and still be so worthy.